with the main sample tuned to our vocals now, what we can basically do is start to look at programming some drums to get this track sounding a little more dance orientated. Now the first thing I've done is, because we're going to program drums, is I've just took out the third and fourth from there, so we're going 3, 4, 1, 2 straight away. So we're kind of playing the full sample part there just so we can get the drums in. Now, I don't think we're going to need a particularly complex drum loop here, because, well, if we just listen back to that, well, there's already a drum loop in there, and although I may EQ the bottom end out of that sampling a little bit, depending on how this goes, I'll only be looking to remove the kick and perhaps a small amount of body from the snare. So basically the hi-hats that are in there are going to remain pretty much intact, so that means that we don't need to go overboard with programming drums. Now that's not to say that we don't require hi-hats in here. We will need to include some, and in fact you'll find that most records of this nature, it's always worthwhile adding more hats to it. Basically, there's multiple reasons for that. You can use the new hi-hats to augment that original rhythm, and if you apply some delay to the new hats, you find that the delayed characteristics of the hats tends to run over and often hide some of the pitch shifting artifacts that are in there. We can also introduce and take away new hi-hats to help with the arrangement for builds and drops, and of course we can also program them to add a bit more of a racy feel, a bit more energy and a bit more push to the music. But that's for later. I mean, first things first, I think what we need to do is we basically need to look at the most important element of any dance record, and that's the kick drum. Now, the first thing we need to consider when we're thinking about a kick drum here is the original that's in there. That's particularly wimpy and a bit weak for dance music. We don't necessarily want that in this mix. I think what we'll have to do is we'll have to replace that with our own kick that has a much meatier, heavier, tighter body to it. Something typical of house music, a typical house music kick drum. Now with this particular mix, we've obviously got two options. We can layer a kick, or we can replace it, which is what I'm thinking of doing. I'm thinking of replacing it, but depending on what you sample, you may be restricted to just layering it. It depends on what you've sampled for your original starting point. So what I'm going to do is, in the interest of just covering everything, I'm going to look at both available options. Now, generally speaking, layering a kick is the least favourable option because of possible flamming. But if there is low frequency content in the sample that you feel is important to the overall sound of your record, you've obviously got no option but to leave it in. Just basically say, I didn't warn you in earlier sessions about basing your sampling judgments around the bottom end of a record rather than the top end. Anyway, if you sampled something because of the low end energy of the mix, you've got no option. You have to layer a new kick over the old kick because you can't exactly EQ it out. And the problem is that layering kicks isn't as simple as you may think. Alongside the flamming, all kicks have a specific pitch, but because it's such a low frequency instrument and such a short duration, it's difficult to actually determine the pitch, and therefore, if you're going to mix in a new kick that has a different pitch than the original, whilst it may sound fine on your monitors, as soon as it hits a club, it'll stand out a mile, and basically the entire bottom end of your mix is going to sound unstable. So the first thing you're going to have to do here is determine the pitch of the original kick drum, or at the very least ensure that your kick drum is the same or in the same key as the original. Now, the easiest way to do that, I find, is basically to use fast Fourier transform analysis. Now, my weapon of choice for that is the Applesoft APEQ. I'm not too keen on the EQ, but the fast Fourier transform in here is brilliant. We'll just set that up. Set that to a fast. Now, basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to play this back, and we're going to see if we can detect the kick in here. Now I'm seeing the kick around there. Got to be careful we don't confuse the kick with the pluck of the bass. So the kick's basically around there. So what we need to do basically is we need to make sure that our kick sits around there. We can match it, and then we can possibly change the key. As long as we stay in the same key as that kick, we should be fine. So basically a good way we can do this basically is we'll create a new track, and what we'll do is we'll put a software instrument on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a sampler on that, and we're going to sample a kick, and we're going to sample that kick to run all the way across the keyboard. So as we move up the keyboard, the kick becomes higher in pitch. And the reason for that is I'll show you as I put it in. We'll just start a mono sampler there. And what we'll do, I think, is basically what that does now is that single kick drum is now all the way across our keyboard here, so we can. Obviously, as we go up the keyboard, it goes higher and lower in pitch. Now, the reason we've done that is we can now throw in our kick drum on each one there, and what we'll do is we'll open the AP EQ there. Again, I'll just set that up. Play that back. Oops, start that playing again. Then we open this one. Let's get it around the same here. Immediately see where the fundamental is there as it moves as we move up and down. We want to run around there. And there we are. I'd say pretty much there we're in the key, so it's obviously tuned to around an F. Obviously, if you listen back to that on its own, that's very, very weak. So what we can do is we can say, well, we'll remain in the same key there. So if we're working in F there, we could always take that down. And play that F there. And basically, that's how you can work it. Now, this is the second option to this, and basically that is we can sculpt our own kick in a drum synthesizer, and that way we can determine the key that way. But programming kicks in a synthesizer, it is quite a lengthy subject, and to be honest, I don't think we have time to start discussing programming kicks here. It's another subject altogether, and I could quite easily take up a good hour just explaining the methodology and then basically programming one after that. And if I do that, I'm going to have to be incredibly heavy-handed with editing this session. So I'll probably end up creating more confusion. So what I'm going to do is say, if you're interested in programming kicks and the various methods of writing professional drum loops, have a look at our fundamental DVD one. That covers all the bases when it comes to talking about drums, programming kicks, programming drum rhythms, and all that. Now, whether we program a drum kick or we use a sample as we have here, we can still suffer from flamming. Basically, that's where your kick moves out of time with the original, and that could be due to the drummer who can't keep time, or even down to your time stretching algorithms. Now, if you come across flamming, the only thing you can really do is sidechain the hell out of the original and try and hide the problem, but that is something we'll look at in a little while. For this particular track that I'm building here, as I said earlier on, we don't really need to keep this bottom end in. There's no need to, because, well, to be honest, if we just listen back to that, there's nothing in that bottom end that we really want to keep. So what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to I'll move up to that one there, and we'll replace that with the Flux E-Pure EQ. Now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to remove the bottom end of this, because we don't really need the bottom end in. What we're more interested in is the high guitars in there. Now, this has to be a good EQ, because anything less, you'll suffer from it when it comes to mixdown. Basically, what we need to do is we need to avoid any distortion at the cutoff frequency. So if you're going to do this, use the very best EQ that you have available. So what we'll do, we'll play it back. Just select the, there we go. That's what we want there, just that high end. I don't want to go too high there. I want to keep a little bit of that bass in, because we are going to program another bass, but I don't think we need to take too much of that bass out. I mean, we don't want to go all the way up there. I think about there's okay. Now obviously we've removed that, so there's no need to keep this in. I'm not that interested in using a sampler instrument like that. Basically what I do want to do is I want to use Ultrabeat. So I'll just call up Ultrabeat here, and what I'll have to do, I'll have to load in all my samples. Oops. Because basically, when I'm programming drums, what I like to do is I like to use this Ultrabeat. Now, obviously, for those who don't use Logic, it's basically Logic's own drum synthesizer and sampler. So, if you're on Windows, any good drum sampler and drum machine will basically do the same trick. Now, as you can no doubt see, we created a number of channels. We had the kick, the snares, the claps, the open hats, the closed hats, and so forth, all the way down to percussion. And each one of these has its own version of Ultrabeat sat on the channel. And basically, each version of Ultrabeat, as you saw, is loaded with its own samples. For example, the kick is loaded with just sample after sample after sample of kick drums, one after the other, all the way up. Now, these kicks here, in fact, all the instruments throughout the Ultrabeats, they're basically a mix of percussive instruments that I've got in various ways. I've programmed them in Ultrabeat, the Waldorf Attack. I've sampled them from records, sample CDs, TV, radio, and so on and so forth. Basically, what they are is they're a collection of the best that I've been collecting for the past 20 or so years. And the reason that I work like this is basically it makes it a lot easier for me, because all I need to do is I can, for example, go on the kick channel. I can draw in a quick MIDI and just put notes in at C1. And as I play those back, I'll just mute that out so you can hear for the moment. I can just select them all. And as I move up, I have a different sample in each one. So we'll just play that back, and I'll try and find a kick that I think suits this the best. I actually quite like that one, so I think what we'll do is we'll use that kick there. The others just sounded a bit off, really, for this mix. Now, This mix obviously is going to be destined for a club system, so that means that we need plenty of low-end energy now. I don't really want to layer two kicks together there because of the problem that I've discussed before of layering kicks and pitch. So basically we've just got two options available to us. First, we can layer a sub bass underneath that kick to give us that low-end energy. Or alternatively, the path I prefer to take for club systems is to actually use the Pultec EQP1A. Now, I'll just call that up here. Where are you? You're in there. And you're there he is. Waves tend to call this the Puig Tech. It's actually it's a Pultec. It's available in Waves format or through the UAD card, but either way, I've got to say this is not a cheap plugin. But I do want to make it clear here that if you do not own this plugin, you simply can't accomplish this. Basically, the Pultec EQ, it's a reproduction of the classic hardware, which it's been the choice of engineers, producers, and even mastering engineers for years, because it really does bring out the individual frequency ranges without really heavily altering any other frequencies. There's no other plugins, freeware or cheaper, that I've heard that can accomplish this same sound. So basically, there's no shortcuts here. Either you have the Pultec and you use it, or you don't and you use the sub bass instead. So basically what we'll do is we'll play this back and we'll just adjust this and get some meat into that kick. One around 60 we want to give as our energy. Oh, there we go. I mean, you can hear straight away there what it does to it. Basically, there's just no other plugin on the planet that does that. It's got to be the Pultec EQP. Or alternatively, if you don't have that, like I said, you can use a sub bass. Sub basses are fairly easy. What you do is, in Logic anyway, you just call up a test oscillator. Watch your ears here. And we just tune that down to 60 Hz or around 60 Hz. And then all we do underneath that is basically call up a noise gate. And then all you do there is you just sidechain the noise gate there to your kick. And then every time you get a kick, that comes on. And basically that's it. And it just gives you that little sub bass. If you're not on Logic, I suspect you can do the same on Cubase or whatever. Ableton, you can do exactly the same on there. And even if you can't have a test oscillator, I'm sure that you can program a sub bass in a synthesizer fairly easily. It's simple stuff really, but incredibly important for dance music. You've got to have that low end energy in the kick, especially if you're doing club music. It's really got to thump away. Now the first thing I want to do before I jump into putting our snares, or I think actually we use claps in this, I'm getting a little bored of snares personally, but the first thing I want to do is I want to bounce this down. I want to bounce this kick down so we can build a side chain. So all I've got to do basically is make sure that's cycled there, solo that, and what I want to do is I just want to bounce that down. And all we do basically is just bring that into that new audio track, and we'll just rename that our side chain. As you see there, basically that's just an audio version of our MIDI kick there, but you notice that we've got a slight tail on the kicks there. And what we want to do is, because we're using this as a sidechain, we need to cut those off because we want this quite dynamic to cut this early. So all I'll do is just place some cuts along there. Rid of that. And all we'll do is do those like that. Again, make sure you've got no output on that audio channel. And all we do is we go over to our main sample there and we call up a compressor. Under our dynamics. There. And then we just set that to our sidechain. Zero attack. About a 2.5 release. Ratio, sorry. Fairly fast release. 20 milliseconds. Turn that on peak. And then what we'll do is we'll just listen to these two and hear how that affects it. I think that's sounding okay. I mean, we can adjust this further as we move along in building our drums and playing around. But basically, I think that's sounding all right, so we'll stay with that. We'll get the next instrument in now. I'm not sure about a snare, so we'll get rid of that. I think what we'll do is we'll put a clap in instead. So we'll copy that down. All we've got to do basically is... That is so car wash, Rolls Royce. Oops. Go away now. Yep. Just play that back and then we'll just move this up and try and find a nice timbre for that. I think actually I prefer that one to that one. It was a bit of a choice between that one and... But I think I quite like that one. Now, one of the biggest mistakes you can make here is just to leave that like that and then move on. If you've seen the fundamental DVD, you're going to know this already, but every individual element in a drum kit, with the exception of the kick, will benefit from modulation. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit of modulation here. And to do that, what we do is use the Sound Toys, the Filter Freak. It's usually good for this. All we do is we change that to a rhythm. So I'll change that to about a bar, I would imagine. Edit that, just slightly off. Now I've been asked here actually if there's a comparison. There's another plugin that's cheaper that does the same thing, and to be honest, no, there isn't. It's pretty much only the Sound Toys Filter Freak that offers all this this madness in here. So I'm afraid there's no option but basically to use this. We'll just set that modulation up now. What's going to happen here is on one kick the filter will be open, on the second kick it'll be slightly closed. Close that down a little. And what that'll do is that'll create a rhythmic surge as one hits that little bit higher than the other one. So we'll just play that back. Now a solo that you can actually hear it. Not very strong, but it doesn't need to be. It needs to keep it quite weak, not too evident. That's alright. I think what we'll do next is we'll get some hi-hats down. I'll just change this to our pencil tool. We'll get the open hi-hats in first. If you've seen the dance music manual, it's really not that difficult. This I'm sure you can all follow along pretty easily. Offbeat eighths. There. I'll just shorten that note down a little, I think. I actually quite like the sound of that, so I think we'll leave that there and we'll just put a bit of Filter Freak on that. Just call it up there. And again, it's the same again, it's nothing too complicated. Sync it to our rhythm. We'll set that on half. We'll just edit that slightly. I mean, we can use a different shape. Just like that. Set our modulation up. So we get quite a nice movement in there. Let's have a listen. You can hear the movement there. I think what we'll do is apply a bit of gain to that. Right? Well, let's get some closed hats in now. Again, not exactly difficult here. All I'll do is go down to C1 and then all I'll do is we'll move these up until we find a nice sound for these. Quite nice there. So again, probably no surprise here. We go back to the Filter Freak, and again, we go for rhythms, sync it to tempo. We'll set this on. I think we'll go over half again. Edit this slightly. I think we'll stay with that, but we'll move that a bit sharper over there. Set that up a little, and then just. I think what we'll do there as well is we'll add some Echo Boy onto that. Just give it a little bit of echo, a little bit of movement in it. I think really I'd like to back up these open hats again. Again, there's no magic to this. It's if you've read the dance music manual, you know what's going on here. It's basically you just keep trying ideas until it all comes together. But I'm thinking these open hats here are sounding a little bit weak, so I'm going to add some more open hi-hats there. So what we'll do is basically that button there copies this track with all the settings here. So what we'll do is we'll just copy that track. And I don't know why it keeps coming up with this. It's the new Logic. Damn, but we are on Ultra Beat there, as you can see. And what I think we'll do is we'll enlarge that a little bit, and we'll just play it back. We'll move these around. We'll play around. That's it. It's just a basic mix there. I think that's pretty much it. I mean, as I said, we've just got to do a basic mix down just to make the drums sound well, so we've got a general idea of what's going on. So, I mean, basically, we'll just recap there, because I imagine, I'm going to have to cut quite a few hours of that out, quite a bit of messing around. Basically, we've got the kick occurring on every beat. We have a clap there, which we're doing on 2 and 4. And we have our open hi-hats, which, again, we've got 2 notes and a short note. And a long note, just to give it that little, I'll just solo that so you can hear it. And again, we're running Filter Freak across it. And then we inserted the second hi-hat, which is just a hit at the end there. It's nothing special. We put a little bit of Echo Boy and a little bit of gain just to give it a slight... Just gives a little tick in the mix, and I think it just adds that little bit of interest in there. And then again, we have open hi-hats again, which are just backing up these hi-hats here. And again, Filter Freak running across them just to give them that bit of rhythmic movement. And then finally, we have our closed hats there, which is on every 16th. I'm running Filter Freak and Echo Boy across them. There. And basically, that's it. If we listen back to that. I mean, basically, it's not mixed properly, as I said. We've just given it a quick mix. We've just balanced a few instruments left and right and just adjusted the volumes just so we can have a general listener and see how we're going and see how it sounds. And I think that drums, they're sounding okay there. So I think what we're going to do is we'll drop a bass line in. And we'll get to work and put a bass line in and see how the whole lot ties together. And then we can move on from there and perhaps add a few more drums if we need them, or perhaps move on to the arrangement. We'll see how it goes. But for the next session, we'll work on a bass line and see what we can get down.